So same deal today as last week. I'll record the session, and then we'll follow up after the session with an email to watch the recording, and also with some resources on our website that everybody can check out. Okay, so as usual, along the bottom there's a button to chat. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to use that chat button to ask them. So I'm here, I'll be doing the talking, but my colleague Rachel Rebello is in the chat, and she'll be answering any questions that you might have along the way, as well as filling in some supporting resources that'll supplement what I'm talking about in the presentation. Okay, so let's begin. All right, so this is session 2. We're talking about developing and curating content. So really this means taking what we worked on last time, which was working with what you already had. So looking at the content you already had, the material, the assignments, the activities, your syllabus schedule, taking all that and just at least getting it online to give you something to start building off of. So now here we're going to start looking into the types of content you can find out there online. And then, oh, okay, yeah, I can turn off my video, and that'll give everybody a little bit more room. It's interesting. We did a session, a second session last week, and it wasn't a thing. So, you know, we only tech support Zoom. We should probably know why it does that, but we aren't sure. So I'll just leave my video off, and then everybody should be able to see a little better. So actually, let me check now. Let me know in the chat. Can everybody see the slide okay and read it? Okay, and also I'll mention too, when you're looking at Zoom, I'm going to turn my video back on for a moment. So when you're looking at Zoom, in the upper right corner, kind of, if you have the chat open, it's a little to the left there. We're on my screenshot in front of me here, it says enter full screen, but for you, there should be an option to do speaker view or gallery view. You want to be in speaker view for most of this presentation so that it puts the focus on me. And it puts the focus on my computer screen, and then everybody else is smaller. And then also, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Probably can't show it, but along the top, you should be able to choose, I think it's called side-by-side mode. But either way, if you can't, it looks like most of you can see. But you should be able to, if my video is like half the screen, which is what I was hearing from a few people last week, you should be able to, in the gap between the video of me and the video of my screen, you should be able to click and pull it, like pull my video, pull my, the video of my face to the right, which would give you more room for mine. So click on the sort of gap if you want to rearrange and choose what takes up more of your screen. All right, so developing and curating content, like I said, we're going to talk about the sort of moving beyond what you've already got and looking for some new things to put up online for your students to help teach. So the first thing is, now that you're looking at working fully online, if you haven't already done it before, the best thing to do is to leverage the internet. It's a whole wide world of stuff out there that you can work with and pull into your course that's already done, made, and can be really useful to you. Kind of think about these services, some of them free, some of them are at a cost or have educational discounts. Could be like textbooks for you, or having them go into like a textbook publisher website or access some materials. There's a lot of good stuff in here. We actually have a page I'm going to jump over to now. And again, a link to this page will be in the follow-up email. On finding educational video. So this is on our website as well. And we just highlight a few different services that are great resources. So the first one is Hoopla, and it actually works through folks' libraries, like your local library in the UMass Dartmouth library, where for anybody who's a student in Massachusetts or who lives in Massachusetts, on the Boston Public Library's website, you can get a free library card online. And then it allows you to sign up for Hoopla, which has movies, TV shows, audiobooks, ebooks, access to a whole lot of digital stuff that is totally free with your sort of library membership. And again, that's free online. So it's a great place to look for stuff that you can have your students watch or read totally for free. It has similar limits to like checking something out of the library. So like they can only have a certain amount of books checked out at once, but it is free. So there is some monthly limits, but if you say, go in here and sign up and get one thing, you know, and pull out this one book or watch this one thing, it's totally free and available for them to use. Some of you may have heard of Canopy. It's sort of like educational Netflix, and this is actually paid for through the library. So you can go into this Canopy website, and again, there's links to access all these sites on this page, which we'll send out a link to. But it has tons of documentaries and videos that are more focused by education, and they also organize their content the same way too. So you can look by subject area, and disciplines and stuff like that. So it's a little easier for you to navigate in that way. But if there's something in particular you're looking for, you can just do like a normal search for the title of something. So Canopy is great. So Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon. So these are like the more commercial options, but they have some good sort of options for students if you want to have them watch something on one of these services, because they have so much stuff. So I sort of took some time to highlight like what students actually would pay for these types of services, and what you could get away with getting them for free. So Netflix has 30-day trials, and then it's $9 a month. And this is not a promotion. I don't get paid by any of these companies. But then Hulu, which is another sort of big service, and Spotify as well for if you're having students do like a music class or something like that. Students pay $5 a month for Hulu, Spotify, and Showtime, which is another sort of premium video service. But it's a lot of stuff for $5 a month for a student. So if you think about how much they could pay for a textbook or access to a textbook publisher's website, that's not very much in comparison. And it gives you access to a whole lot of stuff and that they could watch. Amazon Prime Student, which comes with Amazon Prime Video, is a 6-month trial, and then $6.50 after that. And that's another huge video repository. And then Tubi, which is totally free for anybody who wants to watch it, has a lot of TV and movies that you could link your students to. So again, these are pretty commercial, so it would depend on what you're looking for. Obviously, having them pay for things is not ideal, but if it's just one thing you need, they can sign up and take advantage of a trial and then cancel after that, so they can just watch what you want them to, and then you know, cancel out of it afterward. Or there's a good chance your student might have access to some of these just regardless, because they're very popular services, especially Amazon. So just because they're sort of behind a paywall don't totally sort of rule them out, because again, especially if you just want them to watch one thing at one period in time, they can leverage a trial for the most part. As you can see, the trials are at least a month, so you can take advantage of getting them access to it even for a little bit of time. And another nice thing about all these services too is that they're all the video on all these sites is closed captioned, so it takes care of the accessibility stuff for you. There's also LinkedIn Learning, which is another service the school pays for, which is like a big video sort of repository of tutorials on how to do a whole bunch of different stuff with different technologies. So if you want your students to do a presentation and build it in PowerPoint, or use a piece of software to do some sort of project, you can send them to LinkedIn Learning, or you can send like specific video workshops to your students through here, where it shows them, you know, like a 1-hour workshop on how to use PowerPoint, or how to use Word, or how to use Photoshop or something, so that you don't have to spend your class time talking about how to use those things. And instead, it's these really polished, professional, pre-recorded workshops that are broken up into little 2 or 3 minute clips on how to do a whole bunch of different things in the software that you're asking them to use. It's built into my courses, but it's also just in general built into the quick launch menu in my UMassD. So under that quick launch menu, LinkedIn Learning will be under there. So most people have heard of Khan Academy, and they are specific to sort of academic stuff and sort of teaching and learning. And they have some really great professionally sort of made instructional videos on a ton of different topics. A lot of it is STEM, but it ranges from K through 12 through higher education to like really complicated stuff. I know a lot of math faculty have taken advantage of Khan Academy's content and putting their, you know, sort of supplementing their online assignments with some videos from Khan Academy on how to work through different formulas and different, you know, problems and types of formulas and all that kind of stuff. So there's a ton of really great stuff on there. Again, Khan Academy is a great place to look for tutorial, so not tutorial, that's a bad way to put it, more instructional videos that are a little bit more polished and are like really spoken by an instructor who's a specialist in their field. It's a little bit old at this point, but I'll mention UMass Dartmouth has an instructional media gallery. Its focus is kind of narrow, but there is a YouTube channel with some sort of older, I should say, lessons on different topics that were made specifically by folks at UMass Dartmouth for UMass Dartmouth. And so there are some specifically good ones that still get a lot of use for like proper citations and sort of writing tips and things like that for students. So there is some good stuff in there that you could share with your students, and it all just sort of sits on a YouTube channel that you can search and pull from. Merlot is more than just a wine. It's an academic sort of repository of a ton of stuff. So it's got some like content, like images and documents and videos, but it also has like research and articles and lesson plans and a ton of it's just meant to be like this huge educational resource for people to search through that kind of navigates and works like a library database, if you've ever searched one of those, but it's specific to like resources for instructors. So Merlot can be a cool place to look for ideas or to pull inspiration from, and sometimes to find content. And then good old PBS. PBS always has good stuff right up on their website, different documentaries and series and things like that that you can always search there to pull from and share with your students. And then last up is good old reliable YouTube. Again, YouTube is the people's video service, so you never know what you're going to find on YouTube, but a lot of times you can find gems on there. It's always important. Everything else above this that we've talked about has all verified closed captions. YouTube does automatically generate captions, but they're not always fully accurate. So that's something to check before you choose to use something from YouTube. But there is a lot of professionally done content on YouTube that you can pull into your courses. So it's still a great place to look. And then at the bottom of this page, we have a little workshop we did 5 years ago now on some of these areas. Okay, let's come back here. Okay, so that is some repositories to consider, to pull some content from specifically video. Next up is the library. So most of you, again, will know what the library is here and what you're able to get through the library, but I'll sort of highlight them anyway because they're such a great service. So obviously they have online databases you can search through for articles and different content that you can use for your course, as well as there are library liaisons that are sort of designated per discipline who you can reach out to, and they can help you find the content you might be looking for, connect you to certain things that you might need. And for online courses, they also do online library instruction. So if you've ever had them teach and help with a class in your face-to-face class where they've gone to the computer lab or something, they can do similar stuff for online classes. So we really encourage you to reach out to your librarian and get to know them. And I'll mention too, if I click here, that's not the page I wanted. There was a page, and I'll have to find it and send it back out. But there's a page. Oh, I think Rachel already linked to it in the chat. They already show you can find out who your library liaison is. But there was another page that I found that was nice where they introduced themselves. So it was just a page with all videos from each librarian talking about what they do and their introductions to sort of each of them and their specialties. So I'll find that, and that'll be included in the follow-up email. But the librarians can really be a great resource for you. So that's great for stuff that you can find, and we really encourage folks to find stuff that's already out there online and take advantage of it. But sometimes you just have to do it yourself. And so you have to figure out how to record, create, and make whatever you might need for your online course to relay and teach whatever you need to get out to your students. So we'll sort of talk about 3 different subcategories of that, or subunits. The first being, how do you record some videos and demonstrations to put online for your students? So that's going to be done with Kaltura. Some of you might already know what it is, but it's a tool that kind of works kind of like what Zoom is doing right now, where I'm sharing my screen to you, except instead of it being a live session where other people are with you, you're just talking to your computer screen alone. So you can open this up, open up PowerPoint, talk over your slides, go to a Word document, go to the internet and show a website, and Kaltura is just capturing everything that's happening, as well as what you're saying, so that you can sort of create that virtual lecture where you're like plugged into the projector, and then you're talking out to the students about everything that you want to talk about for a particular unit. It does automatically close caption whatever you record and whatever you said during your recording, but they're not 100% accurate, but we found that they're like really, really close, closer than YouTube. So you can sort of easily review those after you've recorded something to fix them if you need to. And there's also editing capabilities, where if you want to chop something off on the end or cut something out in the middle, through Kaltura you can do that as well. Which is a nice option to have because you never know what might happen in the middle of a recording. And Kaltura isn't just for recording. You can also use it to pull in some old Zoom sessions that you might have done in the spring. You can download those out of Zoom, upload them into Kaltura, Kaltura is kind of like built into my courses. You may never have seen it before, but it's under there, where you kind of have a private space where you can store videos that you've recorded or video files that you have. And Zooms are one of the things that you can upload into there. So Zooms, if you use Zoom in my courses, you know it kind of lives on the left menu of your course. Well, if you download it out of there and put it in Kaltura, it's easier to put it into any course that you have. Or future courses, it makes it much more reusable because it just kind of lives out in a separate area. And Zooms won't live forever. The recordings of the Zooms you've done won't live forever where they currently are. So putting them in Kaltura is a way to sort of save them and make sure you always have them. So now let's talk a little bit about accessibility. So when you upload content to my courses and put it up there for an online course, it may be sort of the first time you've had to think about this. And that goes for a lot of folks. But you may notice when you upload files into my courses or embed an image, you see these little gauges, like a little gas gauge. And these are an accessibility indicator. It's not sort of a perfect measurement, but it can help you identify some potential accessibility concerns within a document or a file. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. And then also within Microsoft Office in Word and PowerPoint, there's a built-in accessibility checker that can help point out some pieces of your document that you might want to address. That is another helpful way to make sure that what you're putting up there for your students is accessible to anybody who might be accessing it. So the first thing is Ally, so that little gauge I showed earlier. And what Ally does is it runs it behind whatever you upload into your site. So for example, if you upload a Word document, you'll notice that it gets this little gauge next to it. And that gauge, when you click on it, shows you potential accessibility issues, and then tells you, okay, this might be a potential issue for your someone who's accessing the document. Here's what you can do to fix it in Word. It also makes it really easy to update the files because it says, okay, these are the issues, and you can click fix, and it says, okay, upload the new document. It rescans it, and it tells you if you've fixed it. Which is really helpful. But the whole sort of goal behind Ally is that it can give students the version of your content that they need when you give it, when you upload it in an accessible format. So on the right there, you can see it shows a few different options. So if you upload, say, a Word document, and the student clicks on a little Ally button, and I'll show you a little bit how this works. It's going to pop up on the student screen. It's going to say, okay, what format do you want it in? I want it in HTML so I can read it right in my browser. I want it in a format that I can read on my reader, my e-reader. I need it in electronic braille. If you have a student who has that need, I can get an audio version so that it reads it out loud to me. So if you give it to the system in an accessible format, it's able to convert it to something else that a student might need in the event that they need it. So let me back out of here and go take a look at that. Okay, so here's my sample My Courses site. And when I put my mouse over this handout here, I can see that there's this little gas gauge next to it. So if I click on there, it tells me the document contains images that are missing a description, but if I go to all issues, it shows me that there's three things really going on here with this document. So it says the document contains images that are missing a description, namely this image right here. It gets this little red sort of circle, or not circle, like an outline to it. It says the document doesn't have headings, and the document has tables that are missing headers. So I can try to address whatever issue that I have that is pointed out. So if I click on Fix, I can say, how do I add descriptions? And then if I click on that, it actually gives you directions on how to add the descriptions to your document or to your images. So an alt text is a word that's going to come up in here. And alt text is basically a text description that you can attach to an image that, for a person who's using a screen reader and not using a computer monitor the same way you and I might, it reads that text to them when the screen reader encounters the image. So you can imagine that someone's, the document's being read to them and it says, 3, maintenance and upgrades are handled by the cloud host, and then it hits this image, and instead of just reading image to the person out loud, it will say photo of a computer mainframe, for example. So this is sort of a simpler example when it's just a simple image like this, but it can really run into trouble, or your documents can run into accessibility issues if you embed tables or blocks of text as images instead of as actual text or an actual table. It can be easier to sort of screenshot something out of the online textbook or off of a website than it is to sort of copy paste it over or recreate it. But the result is, for a student who's not able to actually read the document and needs to use a screen reader, they wouldn't be able to access that content because you can't like highlight it and actually recognize it as text the same way. So if I come back here, go back to all issues, what you can do is when you click Fix on any of these, it gives you the ability to upload a new version. So if I were to upload a new version here, it would change this gauge if I fix the issues. I'm not going to do that just yet because I want to show one other way, or one other area where Ally pops up, and that's if you upload an image like this. So that for example, this picture of a map of the United States, there's no description or no alt text associated with this image. So if I click on this little gas gauge here, it says this image is missing a description, and then it gives you a box to type it in. So I could say, map of the United States of America, and then I can click Add. Or if this was just a decorative image, like a nice smiley face or something, you can click the button to indicate the image is decorative so that a screen reader would just ignore it altogether. So that's always the option of, if it's got important information in it that you want students to know about the image, you can type it in there. Otherwise, you can just say it's decorative, and then it'll just know to ignore it. So I'm going to stick with this description, click Add, and then it goes up. Sometimes it's a little too smart for its own good. And so this one knows that there's other text in the image. So it tells me there is text in this image that I didn't add to the description, but that's okay because all the text in this image wasn't needed. The students didn't need to read every bit of text in here. I gave it enough information so that the screen reader would tell them accurately whatever this is. All right, so that's Ally. Now I'm going to move next to the Office Accessibility Checker. So this is a tool in Office documents and PowerPoints that allows you to check for accessibility issues and work on them. So I have the same. This is the document that I had uploaded in the site which had the no image description in it. So any document, if you go to File and then go to Check for Issues and then go Check Accessibility, this is where you can get the report on a Word doc or a PowerPoint file on the accessibility of it. So check for issues, check accessibility, and then it opens up over on the right side whatever the issues, the potential issues might be. So I can see missing alternative alt text, and it's telling me it's this image, and it sort of guides you right through what you need to do. So if I click on where that says picture 1 has no description, I can say add a description, and then I could type it in here. And similar to Ally, I could also just choose to mark it as decorative if it wasn't an important image that, that needed to be there. Sort of unfortunately, Rachel mentioned in the chat, it would be great if you could make these changes right in Ally, but this is an important reason to keep the Word document versions of all of your content and why you should upload the Word or PowerPoint versions of your content and not convert it to PDF. We'll talk a little bit more about PDFs coming up. But for the most part, the easier things to make accessible, and also for students who might need it, is they are able to make a Word document or a PowerPoint document work better for them, and you're able to make it more accessible if you upload it in those original versions. I know the guidance for years was forever to convert to PDF, but they've sort of pivoted on that based on what's possible for accessibility reasons. So I just fixed my alt text, which is great, but you'll notice that Ally mentioned two other things that weren't in here or weren't picked up by this. One of them was the table didn't have header rows. So that's actually this table right here. So for the most part, you've probably looked at tables before and you see there's like a top row for the most part. So I'm gonna add a row above, and I'm gonna say, and again, I don't even remember what it's about, topic, description. So there, in any table that you create, there should always be a top row that has headers that indicate what type of content is found in the cells below it. So this is all topics. These are all descriptions. And when I click into, when I click into that row and I go to right-click on it and go to Table Properties, there's a tab here for rows. And for the most part, it will automatically mark it as a header row because it knows it's the top row. But there's a checkbox here to repeat as header row at the top of each page. So this is in the table properties in Word. And again, we'll have tutorials for this on the website. Don't feel like you have to write this down, but I want to show you what it does because I think accessibility aside, this is kind of my favorite thing about it, just for the giant table some people have to make. When you check repeat as header row at the top of each page, what that's going to do is it's going to make sure that this row here, let me give it a little background color, is going to be at the top of the page every time you add a table. So if I keep adding rows here, right, and I have a big giant table, automatically on the next page, it's got that header row repeated there. So this means no matter where someone's reading it, it's always going to show the header row at the top of wherever it might land. So here it's connected to the same one on the next page. So even accessibility aside, it's always good to, when you're creating a table, if it, if it ever gets spread across 2 pages, to mark the header rows like this, so that not only readable, is it readable to anybody who's trying to see what's in the rows, but for a screen reader, it always knows to read this row to people first. So it'll always say, screen readers are kind of like top to bottom, left to right, like we read. So this is going to make it so that it doesn't just read this row, then this row, then this row. It's going to say topic, controversy, description, this. Topic, pro, description, this. Topics, con, description, this. And it repeats that every time, that row to them, so they know what content they're being read to. And it's really not that much work. You just sort of right-click in there and mark it as the header row, and then it's all set. And then the last piece was in Ally, it said that this document didn't have headers. So this is a header row for a table, but documents, and most of you will know this if you've done sort of larger documents, especially APA format, but in Word, you can use these headers up at the top to mark different pieces of a document. So if it's a short document, the table doesn't really need, the document doesn't really need headers. But for this particular type of a document, where there's like multiple pages and there's multiple pieces to it, it can be good to mark headers. So if you usually might do like, all right, I'm gonna make it big, I'm gonna make it bold, and then visually I can see that that's the header. But that doesn't actually mark it as a header, it just visually looks like, okay, this is where the header is. But what you can do is you can highlight that line, and then up here use the header 1, header 2, header 3 to make it the way you want it to make it actually tag that as the header. So if I click on header 1, it sort of uses a pre-assigned style, but you don't have to do it that way. So if you already have your headers the way you like them, you could say, all right, this is heading 1, right? Because this is like heading 1, and then the subsections would be heading 2, and then subsections within that would be heading 3. You can just right-click on the heading and then say update heading 1 to match selection. And so it keeps your text looking exactly the same, except now that's the marker of heading 1. So if I'm down here and I have another piece that I want this to be heading 1 as well, and then I mark that heading 1, that format I set up above will now consistently follow throughout the document. So that this is marked as heading 1, the top part is heading 1, and any heading 1 you mark throughout the document will all visually look exactly the same. And then the same thing goes for heading 2. Say you want all heading 2s to be italicized. You could say mark that as heading 2, and then heading 2 here, I come down, I say that's heading 2, that gets italicized, so all the styles match. But not only do all the styles match, there's sort of a cool way to test it. And again, if you've ever published or anything, you'll know how this feature works. You can test whether you have sort of tagged up your document properly by inserting a table of contents. So that's under here. And then sort of blank one. So this is how table of contents are actually generated. It's based on what you've marked as headers. So my heading 1, the first heading 1 on the document was term project outline. The second one was this, and then the heading 2s under that were this and this. So you can see if you've tagged the headers properly in your document just by generating a table of contents. If you have a big giant document with a lot of headers, it's probably just good to have a table of contents anyway, but this is sort of how that function works. It's twofold. It's an accessibility thing, so people can more easily navigate the document and jump to parts that they need to read. This is especially important in a syllabus, so that students don't have to have a document read to them top to bottom every time to find the piece they need. They can jump in and jump to the, grade breakdown section or the course schedule section much more easily that way by marking the headers. All right, so I'm going to pull this out of here, and I'm going to save my document, and then I'm going to come back into my courses, and I'm going to show you how to upload the new version. So if I did well and fixed all my accessibility issues, which I hope I have, I'm going to use this little thing here to upload my new version, which it's on my other screen, so I'm just going to upload it here, drop it right in this little box. Ally is going to take it in, and it's going to rescore it for me. Perfect, 100%. It's almost like I set it up that way. So now it's fixed it and it's put it in there, and all the header rows are in place. It's got headers, and then my image had a description. So it's all set, and the Ally score has gone up. So I sort of set that one up to be sort of easy for me to fix. It depends on the document, especially if it's an older document you've had for a long time. It can be a little bit more work. But if it's sort of just a plain text document with like a table or an image in it, it doesn't have to take very long to fix these things. And it can make a big difference for the students on the other end trying to review them. So to sort of show the other end of this and sort of what it produces, for you and for a student, when you hover over a document, you'll see this little A with a down arrow. And if you click on there, these are the alternative formats. So if I say I want something in an HTML format so that I can read it right in my browser as opposed to opening it in Word, I could choose that. So I'm going to click download. And then it can take a few minutes to convert this, but I know that was small. So this is what it converts it to. So here it gives you kind of an idea of how it's able to read or look at this document for a student. So it sort of converted it to a web page for someone who might need it. And again, it gives them the more you've built in, the more it's able to tell the student. But it can also be insightful as to what your document actually looks like underneath the formatting. And then similar, if I do audio, this one takes a little bit longer. This will actually convert it to an audio file so that students can have it read to them if they need to. All right, so that can take a while, so I'll come back to that later. But yes, checking the accessibility of your documents, most of the issues can be fixed really quickly, and they can be pointed out by either Ally or the accessibility checker in Office. And it's a good idea to check those and sort of make the changes you can, because it can make a big difference for the students, even those who don't disclose on the other end. So here's one that's been sort of an ongoing battle because it's sort of tough to go without them, and that's working with scanned files. So a lot of people have had scans, from textbooks or from library databases even that are, sometimes have like the black bars on the side, or that weird sort of, they're crooked, or the text is a little fuzzy, or, you can see the crease of the book in the middle because it was just dropped on a scanner bed. Whenever possible, avoid using scanned readings and documents because they're almost impossible to fix and actually make accessible for a student who needs them. We've actually had that happen pretty often where a student has said, my computer can't read this to me, can you give it to me in a different format? And then the instructor gets stuck in a hard place where they don't have it in any other format because it doesn't exist in any other format. And so there is some ways to fix it, but as I put on the slide here, you can fix them, but you don't want to, because essentially there's software that can try to recognize the text in a PDF, but it's really not perfect. So it can see, a 1 and a C next to each other might look like a K because visually they kind of look like a K and that sort of shape is there. So it looks like it's okay to you, but then to a student using a screen reader, it reads the letter K instead of like 1C. And it can happen with, anytime text is italicized, it can interpret the text, puts 2 letters together and thinks that's one thing. The computer is great at producing content, but then when you take it out of the computer and then put it back in, it's not able to interpret it as well as you might think. So especially older scans that are sort of fuzzy, it's almost impossible to fix those for a student. So whenever possible, always save the Word document versions if you created it, or save the PowerPoint versions, or try to find a different version that's not scanned, or find an alternative piece of content that's gonna cover the same stuff. Inevitably, you might encounter something where it's just like, I have to use this scan, this is the only thing that sort of works for what I'm trying to do, but just be aware that it can definitely present issues for a student who's using a screen reader to review and access your content.
I just wanted to make one comment. Hi, everybody. This is Rachel. We have had a few conversations with the librarians about scans in particular for obvious reasons. And the most recent updates that we've received have been encouraging folks to link directly to databases for several reasons. Once, it helps them, it helps them gauge the traffic for certain articles, which databases are most useful. And then also, the databases themselves provide alternative formats. They make sure that they stay up to date and compliant rather than instructors juggling the file types themselves and worrying about how to manually ensure accessibility. Kind of let the databases do the work. So I know it's not always feasible, but whenever possible, try to just link directly to database articles and kind of put that responsibility on them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, Rachel's absolutely right. And you may have seen this actually on some databases. So I just pulled up a random thing that I could find, for example, but a lot of them have been adding this ability to translate, to change the font size, and then also listen. So even if they put something up and it is a scan file, most of them are working through all of their scan files to add these alternative formats in there so that if someone wants to listen to it, they can click listen and it will just start reading it out loud to them instead. Or if they're having trouble reading it, they can actually open a version where they can change the font size and make it bigger, or translate it even into a different language. So not all of the databases are up on this technology, but linking directly to this page, wherever it might be, provides it, when that does become available. If it's not, which again, on most services it is, the alternative version is right there for the students. So instead of uploading the PDF, like Rachel said, link to this type of a page instead. They'll have to be logged in, but all students, when they're in my courses at least, excuse me, are already logged in, so it'll just drop them right in there.
Another thing to point out too is that because federal law had changed, I think January of 2018, to ensure a new level of ADA compliance in particular for web-based content, all these databases, publisher sites, all those resources are also under the same requirements that we are. So again, if you're adding material to your site, it becomes your responsibility to ensure accessibility compliance. But if you're linking directly to the databases or to a publisher site, or you're pulling in publisher materials, they have a responsibility to provide accessible materials to you to use as well. So I would leverage them whenever possible, just because it's the most efficient way to get this done for you as the instructor.
Yeah, and I am personally not a huge fan of textbook publishers. But I always like to sort of maintain the relationship of we're giving them tons of money, so the least they can do is give you the materials in the best format possible for you and for the students. So that, especially for the folks who use publishers' PowerPoints, if you run the accessibility checker on them, if you've had those PowerPoints for a couple of years, it's just going to be like a rainbow of issues picked up by the accessibility checker. But instead of jumping in and fixing those yourself, you and your students have already paid for those. So they should be given to you in the format that's accessible. So you can email your publisher and say, I need these in an accessible format, and they've got to provide them to you, like Rachel just said. And so that, again, making use of what's already out there, get the most up-to-date PowerPoints and making sure your publisher provides them in an accessible format. Not only does that save you time and give you nice, clean PowerPoints, but it helps out the students on the other end. Okay. So I'll also show off, we have a page on how can I make my content accessible. So let me open this up. And it has tutorials and sort of walkthroughs of how to make all the different content we've looked at today, how you can sort of think about making them accessible when you put them online. So we have a page on how to work on your videos, Word documents, PowerPoints, even those scanned PDFs, and then also some tips for doing things in my courses. And it's got little tutorials and tips. Again, we try to highlight the simple fixes that can make things, on your course site the most sort of usable for you and for the students. So again, we'll link to this in the follow-up email, but you can learn more about how to make all that happen. But the biggest things are try to find stuff that's already accessible first. Then you don't have to worry about it. You pick a video from a source that's already closed captioned. You make sure what you're getting from your publisher is already accessible. Upload the Word documents in the PowerPoint versions instead of PDFing. Sort of avoiding the stuff that's not accessible saves you time on the other end, trying to make things you have accessible, which can be a little more time consuming. All right. So I'll mention for the next week's session, we sort of changed the name a little bit. It was finalizing your fall plan, but now it's online engagement and wrap up. So it's going to be, the second half is going to be still wrap up and finalizing, but we noticed there was a little bit of a hole where we didn't sort of create an opportunity to talk specifically about community building online and how to do more of the interactive stuff that you would usually do face-to-face online. So we're going to spend some time talking about some tools and strategies for that in the beginning of the session. So if you're still signed up, that it's blind to you, but we just wanted to give a heads up that we've changed the name a little bit, and that we've got some more exciting content in the first half of that session for you. Specific to like presentations, group work, and that type of stuff. So look forward to that. So last slide here is our homework. So see if you can find some content in the places that we've shown off today, and then also get to know your librarian if you think they might have some resources that you could benefit from, and it's specific to your discipline. And again, I'll get that. Oh, here's the link to that page. I think Rachel put it in the chat as well, but I just want to show it. Yeah, so they have a video here. So learn about Rachel Baum, Judy, Lorraine, and this is just all the different librarians and all the different specialties so that you can sort of, they can introduce themselves and sort of tell you what they offer. Also, try to record a Kaltura workshop. We highly recommend that everyone install Kaltura on their computer because especially going into an uncertain fall, if you haven't used it before, it's a great tool to just have. And once it's installed and you've already done one recording, it just sits there, and whenever you need to open it up and do a quick video for your students on whatever it might be, it's there and it's ready to just record and put something up there for your students. And then lastly, work on the ally scores. We know it's tough working on accessibility of some documents, and we're happy to help you through some of it, but do whatever you can to get those little ally gauges as green as possible for your students. All right, so we designed in a little bit of time here on the end to take any questions. I'm also going to turn on microphones if anybody would like to chat and talk about what they've been thinking about so far, any questions they might have about this session or the last session. We would be happy to answer those questions, or even just talk about what you're thinking about for fall. We'd be happy to hear about it. So microphones are on. So I see a question there about scans, like if there's a book that I really want to use and it's not available any other way but a scan. I'll tell you, there is a way to make a scanned document um, to ensure that the document itself is correct and accurately scanned and what they call OCR'd, octopus, optical character recognition, where it's identifying and reading the text correctly. We can show you how that works. You're not going to enjoy it. So the best thing that you can do is to try to find something else. And I know that's a tough pill to swallow. But if you're really, really committed to a piece of content, you can do it, and we'll help you. We'll show you how to do it. But it's a lot of work. You basically have to make sure that it recognizes every single letter correctly in the document, and you can review that. And sometimes it's good. You know, we recommend find the best scanner you possibly can that gives you the nicest, cleanest. Like, you want that scan to look like it was originally like a Word document. You know, there's no smudges, no Windex that scanner dock a bed before you do it so that it's nice and clean, and then try to get the scan as clean and looking as possible, the text lined up properly so that it's best able to recognize the text. But again, if you've got a scan that you just have to have, we can do our best to sort of help you check it to make sure it's correct. But it does involve you sort of like painstakingly going through word by word. Yeah, the librarians can't do like magic with the scans. Sometimes they're able to find a version that's not scanned and that was digitally authored originally. Other times they can't, but they'll be able to get you, if there is something out there, they'll get you as close as they can to it. Yep, session 3 is next Monday, same time, Monday, 11 o'clock. I know accessibility can be a little scary. I mean, it's still scary for us, and we're the ones who made all the resources on how to do these things. But don't feel like you're out there on your own. We're going to put tutorials out there and stuff, but we're happy to go through, you know, doing a Word document for the first time, working at a PDF for the first time, and going through it with you. It's tricky, and not all documents are created equal. Each one sometimes requires something different. All right, any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, doesn't look like it. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. We hope everybody has a great week. And if you have any questions in the meantime, let us know. And we will be sending out a follow-up email later this afternoon. Oh, hello. Yeah, who's there?
I'm sorry. This is Amy Shapiro. I actually did just come up with a question. Everybody thought they were off the hook, and now I'm taking it.
That's okay. That's what we built in the time for it. Yeah, what's up?
So let's say, you know, you assign a book, but it's not a textbook, right? Like, there's just an old-fashioned book that you want them to buy. Are you not allowed to do that because of accessibility issues?
No, not at all. If you just want them to buy a book, well, I would say if you want them to buy a book, almost all textbook publishers have put out the option of an ebook.
But if it's not a textbook, right? So there are academic, you know, audience books that are not textbooks, right? You know, just nonfiction. So
reach out to the publisher and say, do you have an ebook version of this? Sometimes, a lot of times they do. Like textbooks have digital versions a lot of the time, and it really depends on the publishers. Again, because there's been a lot of pressure on them to provide accessible formats, especially because they're the original authors. They're like, sure, yeah, if you want to pay the same price and not have me have to print it and mail it to you, that's great. And so they'll have an avenue for folks to be able to get a digital version, or potentially some other type of version of it. But sometimes if it's not already listed on the publisher of that book's website, or on like an Amazon as a digital option, try reaching out to them and see.
Okay, thank you.
Another option too, Amy, is reaching out to our Center for Access and Success. Wendy Chaka is the director, and I believe the assistant director is Thomas Dotson, excuse me, D-O-T-S-O-N. They are a group on campus that can help with finding students accessible materials for any of the requirements that the students, that the instructors have required, or vice versa. So along with what Andrew said, they're a great place to check in, especially if somebody needs an official accommodation request. They're going to have to help with converting any of those materials, or at least find resources that kind of help bridge that gap. So I would always check in with them too if you have something that's questionable that can't be found in an e-text or an e-version.
Mm. Yep. And
Thank
they've got
you.
a lot of experience with that, specifically with students. So,
Thank you.
okay. All right. So I guess that that wraps us up. So thanks again, everybody, for coming. See you next week.